All right, today we're jumping into a pretty intense report from CBN News. It alleges there's a targeted, systematic campaign of violence happening against Christians in Nigeria. We're going to break down exactly what their investigation claims and the evidence they present.
So the report doesn't start with a bunch of statistics or charts. Instead, it drops us right into a specific, pretty harrowing event. It takes us to a place called Waki Village, which is in the southern part of Nigeria's Kaduna state, a region the report identifies as being mostly Christian.
And just like that, we're right in the middle of it. According to their sources, on a Sunday night, militants just stormed into Waki Village and started shooting. This quote from a journalist really captures how sudden and terrifying the whole thing was. And that one night had a very real, very tragic human cost. The report confirms 9 people were killed. It's a stark number that just grounds the whole story in tragedy. But the story of how the number got to 9, well, it gets even worse.
Okay, so the report lays out this timeline to show how it all unfolded. The initial attack happens at 10 p.m. and 7 people lose their lives. Then, young people from a nearby village hear what's going on and rush over to help. But the same attackers were apparently waiting for them. They ambush the rescue party, and 2 more were killed. The rescue mission turned into another tragedy.
So this all begs the big question, right? Who was behind this? The report is very, very specific about who it says is responsible.
And this is a really important point in their reporting. They are very careful with their words. They make it clear they are not talking about the entire Fulani ethnic group. Instead, they point the finger at what they call a Fulani ethnic militia, an armed group that they say is focused on one thing: seizing land.
To back up their claim, the report includes this chilling quote, which they say comes from local sources who heard the attackers shouting. The words they allegedly used are presented as evidence that this wasn't just random violence, but a religiously motivated attack.
And this is where we get to the real heart of the CBN report's argument. They push back, and they push back hard, against what they call the politically correct narratives often used to explain this kind of violence in Nigeria. Yeah, this really lays it all out, doesn't it? On the left, you've got the explanations we often hear. It's a conflict between tribes, it's about land disputes, maybe it's the effects of climate change. But on the right, you see what the report is alleging. No, this is an organized militia. It's coordinated land grabbing, and it's deliberate ethnic cleansing. A completely different picture. And they really hammer this point home. Words matter. The journalist in the report says, look, calling this a dispute is just wrong. A dispute is a disagreement between 2 sides. He argues that attacking a village in the middle of the night while people are sleeping, that's not a dispute. That's a violent takeover, plain and simple. Okay, so if it's a takeover, what's the motive? Why is this happening? Well, according to the source, the why was laid out in a series of non-negotiable demands that were made before the attack even happened.
And these weren't negotiation points. The report claims an emissary showed up and laid out these 3 terms for peace. It's presented as a demand for total submission. Give us your land, give us your rivers, and finally, give us your wives.
And here's the kicker. The report claims this isn't a one-off event. It's part of a pattern, a playbook, if you will. The community refuses the demands, an attack follows, the attackers allegedly seize the land, bringing their own people to live there, and then, to top it all off, they even rename the village. It's described as a complete erasure of the community that was there before.
So the last part of the report kind of zooms out. It moves from what's happening on the ground, asking a really sharp question about the world's reaction, or, the lack of one. And this is it. This is the raw question at the heart of their frustration. With everything they've laid out, they're basically asking, why isn't anyone doing anything? They describe these repeated massacres, and they just can't seem to understand the silence from national and international groups. And the report offers its own answer to that question. It points fingers at the Nigerian government and what it calls conventional media, accusing them of being too politically correct. The claim is that these groups are intentionally avoiding the specific language, calling it a Fulani ethnic militia or land grabbing. But on the flip side, they do praise a few organizations. They highlight groups like Truth Nigeria, Equipping the Persecuted, and, not surprisingly, CBN itself, the network that made the report. These, they say, are the outlets willing to tell the story using the unfiltered language we've been talking about.
So where does all this leave us? What the CBN report does is paint this incredibly stark picture of targeted persecution, and it argues that this story is being actively ignored or reframed by major institutions. And that narrative is in direct conflict with other, more common explanations for the violence. So it really forces you to ask a pretty tough question.
When you have two completely different stories about the same conflict, whose version gets told? And maybe more importantly, how does that